quite like a movie that just hooks you the second you hear about its premise, be it Speed's unstoppable bus, Toy Story's sentient playthings, or Inception's action thriller set entirely within dreams. And though an imaginative yet easily digestible concept can quickly garner social media interest, it sadly doesn't mean the end result will actually be any good. And as such, the annals of cinema are littered with hugely promising movies that successfully sold their premises to audiences, though didn't quite manage to deliver a consistently compelling film in the bargain. So, with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Whatculture, here with terrible movies that blew awesome concepts. The Box. Based on a story where a couple receive a box from a mysterious man who offers them $1 million if they press the button on top. But here's the catch. Pressing the button will kill somebody they don't know. It's an incredible what-if elevator pitch of a premise, and one that captured the public's imagination in the lead-up to the film's release, aided by the appealing involvement of writer-director Richard Kelly. So, what went wrong? Well, The Box unfortunately cemented Kelly as a one-hit wonder director, for despite his film's riveting hook, he ultimately failed to make the most of it or lead his characters in a remotely satisfying direction. Receiving a rare F cinema score from audiences, there was widespread dissatisfaction at the film's third act in particular, which seems to suggest that Kelly wrote himself into a corner and couldn't find a way out of it. Given that the original story was originally adapted into an episode of the Twilight Zone, it's painfully obvious that there just wasn't enough material here for a feature film adaptation. Tellingly, in addition to its critical and commercial failure, Kelly hasn't directed another film in the decades since.
Film and TV is cool, but you know what else is cool? Protecting your privacy online. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 3 months free if you sign up today. I'd make that deal. Damn good deal.
Hancock. What if a guy with superpowers was a suicidally depressed alcoholic who caused millions of dollars in property damage and was more of a super scourge than a superhero? In 2008, the hype was certainly real for this ahead-of-its-time black comedy superhero film, boasting a stonking $150 million budget and a killer cast. So, what went wrong? As is so often the case with big-budget movies, a brilliant original idea had most of its edges planed away during production. Hancock is based off a script called Tonight He Comes, which spent the better part of a decade being passed around Hollywood before it was finally rewritten into what would become Hancock. And during that process, the R-rated tone was reworked in favour of a broader, more family-friendly one. Though it's generally accepted that Hancock begins solidly, things take a sharp turn at the midway point, with an increasingly contrived and off-putting number of revelations which overcomplicate a fairly straightforward character study. In a post-Deadpool world, it's easier to imagine studios accepting the original script at face value, but back in 2008, the world clearly wasn't quite ready for a more rough-edged vision of superheroism. Transcendence. After an AI scientist, Dr. William Castor, is mortally wounded, his consciousness is uploaded to a quantum computer, allowing Will to survive physical death, but raising questions about the precise nature of human existence. With Christopher Nolan's acclaimed cinematographer Wally Pfister directing a script that appeared on the coveted blacklist for Best Unproduced Screenplays, and with a brilliant cast, there were plenty of reasons to be excited. So what went wrong? This was 1000% down to the scripts, and though Pfister made a few directorial stumbles in his debut, he ultimately acquitted himself fairly well for a first-time filmmaker given a $100 to $150 million budget. Though Transcendence asks a compelling central question, what is it to be human, it's ultimately a depressingly superficial film that thinks it's far smarter than it actually is. The characters routinely act like idiots, the tech logic doesn't line up with how the internet actually works, and the majority of the ensemble cast are wasted in forgettable nothing roles. Worse than all this though, Transcendence is just thunderously dull, and it's likely that few have even actively thought about it since its cinematic release. Truth or Dare? What if Truth or Dare was more than just a harmless game played by drunken teenagers? What if it was governed by a malevolent supernatural force which kills anyone who either lies or fails to complete their dare? On paper, it's certainly a neat, easily marketable concept for a fun R-rated comedy horror flick in the vein of Final Destination, where irritating teens are brutally killed off in imaginatively gnarly ways by an unseen murderous entity. So what went wrong? So many things. Granted, Blumhouse knew exactly what they were doing with Truth or Dare, constructing a stunningly tame PG-13 horror flick which would appeal to the adolescent crowd and pull in easy profits as a result. It ultimately grossed almost $100 million against a mere $3.5 million budget, so it certainly worked out. Yet this film basically goes in the exact opposite direction that it should have. The tone takes itself way too seriously, there's no self-awareness regarding how irritating the characters are, the PG-13 rating ensures tame, choppy death scenes, and the CGI smile everyone wears before dying is more laughable than creepy. The performances suck, the visuals have all the blandness of a forgettable CW teen drama show, and the ending is about as hilariously desperate as sequel bait finales come. In time. In the 22nd century, humans have been engineered to stop aging at 25, after which they receive a one-year countdown to death. As a result, time has become a universal currency, where acquiring more of it, either through work or more nefarious means, is of the utmost importance. Oscar-nominated screenwriter Andrew Niccol was hired to write and direct the film, and given his history of penning socially relevant sci-fi films, it was easy to be excited from the outset. So what went wrong? This is perhaps the textbook example of incredible premise, awful execution, because Niccol deserves a wealth of credit for coming up with such a unique allegorical hook. But despite some intriguing world building, a lack of consistent in-universe logic alongside two utterly unremarkable protagonists make In Time more a frustrating, weirdly generic experience than anyone ever anticipated. Laughably unsubtle in serving up limp action sequences, Niccol's film doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of its ludicrous potential. Tomorrowland. A washed-up genius inventor and a hopeful teenager venture together to Tomorrowland, a futuristic secret society that harbors some disturbing secrets about the future of humanity. With total legend Brad Bird directing, it's safe to say that Tomorrowland was one of 2015's most anticipated movies. So, what went wrong? Though the performances are fine enough and it sure looks handsome, Tomorrowland is, for all of its fist-pumping about the boundless possibilities of human achievement, a rather ironic monument to failed potential. Bizarrely charmless and sterile, the film sees Bird misguidedly keeping Clooney off-screen for around an hour while forcing Robertson to follow a series of uninspired plot threads towards their inevitable collision. Tedious. That's the word. It's tedious. Terminator Salvation. What if Terminator fans finally got that future war movie they've been asking for since the very first Terminator movie? What if that incredible opening sequence from T2 was, the entire movie? And what if it starred Christian Bale as John Connor? Sounds good, doesn't it? So what went wrong? It was incredibly easy to be lured in by the terrific marketing for this film, which touted the fourth Terminator movie as a gritty answer to the not bad but overly comical Terminator 3. Yet Salvation ultimately goes too far the other way, stripping out even the agreeable black humour of the first two movies, leaving behind a dull, soulless husk of a blockbuster without much on its mind at all. Also, Bale's shouty performance is a total misfire, failing to convey the heroism or the conflicted nature of the Resistance leader. And the CGI Arnie's pretty bad too. The One. You can just imagine writer-director James Wong pitching this movie to Columbia Pictures as Jet Li's Highlander, because it's honestly one hell of a hook. The One casts Lee as a rogue interdimensional police officer who decides to visit all 124 parallel dimensions and kill every alternate version of himself, gaining power with each one he kills. So what went wrong? The One is a casualty of the post-Matrix boom, where every sci-fi action flick wanted to be a mind-bending, CGI-fueled martial arts extravaganza in the pursuit of epic box office receipts. And though it arguably works as ironically entertaining garbage, the film ultimately fails to make the most of its Jet Li versus Jet Li premise, serving up wonky, technically rough action set to hilariously inappropriate new metal music. I mean, it was the early noughties, need I say more? Also, Jason Statham has hair in this film, which is just inherently off-putting. Passengers. A spacecraft transporting 5,000 colonists to a far-flung planet suffers a malfunction, causing one of the inhabitants, Jim Preston, to be woken from stasis 90 years early. In order to stave off crushing lifelong loneliness, Preston wakes up another passenger, Aurora Lane, without her knowledge or consent. So, what went wrong? The tone and marketing for this film were all wrong. Though Columbia ultimately decided to conceal the fact that Jim is the cause of Aurora waking up, this was actually revealed in an early synopsis released by the studio before they decided that this darker element might turn off more mainstream viewers. But the biggest issue stems from the script and direction, which failed to adequately convey the agony of Preston's predicament and insist that the blossoming romance between Jim and Aurora is genuine rather than, sublimely creepy. Had the film taken place from Aurora's perspective and then sort of morphed into a horror film of sorts in Act 3 once Jim's desperate act is revealed, then Passengers really could have been something. Instead, it wants audiences to root for a most questionable love story indeed. In addition to this, neither Chris Pratt nor Jennifer Lawrence brought much to the table, and despite being the hottest movie stars on the planet at the time of the film's release, their chemistry was completely lacking. Downsizing. A sci-fi dramedy from Alexander Payne, where Paul and Audrey Safranek decide to undergo an experimental new procedure, shrinking themselves down in order to escape their financial problems and live a more prosperous life. But when Audrey bails out at the last minute, a miniature Paul is now forced to re-evaluate his life choices. The film came jam-packed with satirical promise, especially given Payne's prior Oscar-winning success, not to forget his fantastic cast. As such, Downsizing was widely expected to be a major Best Picture Oscar threat in late 2017. So, say it with me now, what went wrong? After a compelling first act establishes the premise and places Paul in this wacky predicament, Payne finds himself as a lost writer-director, unable to pull the alluring scenario in any further interesting direction. Rather, the bulk of the movie's bloated remnants are needlessly devoted to the Vietnamese activist character in a subplot that's more grating, charmless and misguided than politically relevant. Rather than serve as a stinging satire about late capitalism that makes the most of the cast's charms, it's a ham-fisted piece of environmental hand-wringing that feels like somebody making a half-baked effort to emulate Payne's style above all else.